It's Andy from the iReview Tech, and for this week's video is about the iPhone 14, which could have the biggest changes in years. Here's what I know so far. The iPhone 14 rumors have started to gather pace even though the iPhone 13 is still relatively new. In fact, there was a major rumor and alleged design reveal ahead of the current phone's launch. It's still early days in the rumor cycle, so we advise you take a critical eye to the information tidbits to date. We've done exactly that below. And we've also picked apart 7 biggest rumored iPhone 14 upgrades so far. With a new design, the return of Touch ID, improved cameras and even USB connectivity, there's a lot to make Apple's next phone rather compelling. To the extent that you might want to wait for the iPhone 14. With all that in mind, here's what we've heard so far about the iPhone 14. Why it figures to be one of the biggest Apple products of 2022 and what we'd like to see from next year's smartphone. We've heard no hint on a potential release date for the iPhone 14. But going by previous Apple iPhone launch events, we'd expect to see the iPhone 14 make its debut in September 2022. As for price, it's also difficult to predict. But we suspect the iPhone 14 will match the price of the iPhone 13, which starts at $799 for the regular iPhone 13 and $999 for the iPhone 13 Pro. However, there could be no iPhone 14 mini at all, so we'd expect a larger 6.7-inch iPhone 14 Max to cost $899. From there, the iPhone 14 Pro could cost $999 and the iPhone 14 Pro Max $1,099 or more. Is there no iPhone 14 mini? Despite the iPhone 12 mini's reportedly poor sales, Apple has revealed an iPhone 13 mini. But the mini could be toast after that, as the company will reportedly shake up the iPhone 14 lineup for 2022. There could be a larger iPhone 14 Plus or Max to go along with the regular 6.1-inch iPhone 14, so there would be 2 regular-size phones and 2 larger-screen iPhone 14 models. This was further backed up by Prosser, who in a video claimed the iPhone 14 Max will be the replacement for a mini phone, offering a 6.7-inch display only without coming with a load of Pro features and thus an hefty price tag. Given the appetite for larger phones, a big yet more affordable iPhone could be just the thing for iPhone fans. Ditching the iPhone 14 isn't the only big change expected versus the iPhone 14. See our iPhone 14 versus iPhone 13 comparison for all the biggest rumored differences so far. The first update is the iPhone 14 design. According to Jon Prosser in his front page tech video, the iPhone 14 will look like an iPhone 12 crossed with an iPhone 4, in that it'll stick with flat edges. But on those edges could be a mute button and a group of rounded buttons for volume central, harking back to the iPhone 4. Supposedly, the sides of the iPhone 14 could be made out of titanium, which could make it tougher and stronger than the previous iPhones. Whereas the back would retain the glass finish but seemingly with a satin-like finish. Speaking of edges, there are rumors that a next-gen iPhone will be portless, but Prosser claims the iPhone 14 will stick with Lightning ports. Another design change potentially in the cards for the iPhone 14 is the trio of rear cameras will no longer protrude from the iPhone's rear but sit flush with the back. Given advancements in camera sensor technology and lens manufacturing, this could be a possibility. Bloomberg's Mark Gurman has also added his thoughts on the iPhone 14 leaks and has claimed the next Apple phone will have a complete redesign. Setting is rather far apart from the iPhone 13. That's because, according to Gurman, Apple's engineers were working behind the scenes on bigger things that will take more time. And as a result, we're set to see more significant changes for the iPhone 14 over the iPhone 13. And the most notable change is set to be the final removal of the display notch. That's been present since the iPhone X. More on that later. It has no notch, kills the rear camera bump and comes with USB-C connectivity. How likely such changes are is open to discussion. But we hope there's some nugget of truth to this concept. If you really want to geek out, iReview has put together a very cool but also very unrealistic concept of a sliding iPhone 14. While it won't give you second display, we see Apple going the foldable route. Next is the iPhone 14 display. Expecting a shakeup in the iPhone 14 range, as we'll reportedly see a standard iPhone 14 and iPhone 14 Pro come with a 6.1-inch display, and a possible iPhone 14 Plus and iPhone 14 Pro Max to sport a 6.7-inch display. So no more 5.4-inch mini. Given the iPhone 13 Pro and 13 Pro Max have a 120Hz refresh rate display, it would be great to see all iPhone 14 models have such a screen. Likely using an LTPO panel or an evolution of that display tech. However, one report from the Elec says that at least one iPhone 14 model will sport an LTPS display, which means a 60Hz panel could be sticking around. And always-on display would also seem logical for the iPhone 14 given it was tipped for the iPhone 13 but never made it into the latest iPhone. But the most significant change tipped for the iPhone 14 is the removal of a display notch. but that it is easier than under-panel camera. There is some chatter that if Apple does go for an under-display take on Face ID, it'll be kept for the iPhone 14 Pro models. How Apple would adopt a punch-hole camera and still use Face ID without under-display sensors remains open to debate. Perhaps the iPhone 14 could have a slightly larger top edge to hold the sensors, or use advanced image processing via the selfie camera to avoid the need for IR scanning. Either way, we're very much hoping that the current display notch is consigned to Apple's design history books, as it's now rather chunky by modern smartphone standards. The return of the Touch ID. One of the most significant changes for the iPhone 14 over its predecessors is tipped to be the return of Touch ID. Only rather than get integrated into a power button, it will supposedly be embedded under the iPhone 14's display, much like a lot of fingerprint sensors on the best Android phones. According to a recently leak, the iPhone 13 Pro models will come with an under-display take of Touch ID. But the leaker was careful to say that this take on Touch ID is still being tested and it's unclear if we will end up seeing it. A separate leak from @Panda is bald on Weibo in a since-deleted post says that the iPhone 14 actually won't have in-display Touch ID, so the jury is out on how likely under-display Touch ID on the iPhone 14 will be. Next is the iPhone 14 cameras. I haven't heard a lot about the cameras of the iPhone 14 so far, but there are some interesting rumors. One report from Apple analyst Ming-Chi Kuo tips a 48MP main sensor for the iPhone 14 Pro models, which would be a big jump from the 12MP camera on the iPhone 13. Better telephoto capabilities would also be appreciated, as the iPhone lags behind the likes of the Samsung Galaxy S21. In fact, it would be rather neat if Apple drew inspiration from the Galaxy S21 Ultra and opted for a secondary telephoto camera with something like a 10x optical zoom. One Apple patent points to Apple working on a periscope-style zoom camera, which could make its way to the iPhone 14, or at least the Pro models. iPhone 14 next specification is the battery life and charging. So far we only have tidbits of info on the potential iPhone 14 specs. Rather confident that 2022's iPhone will make use of an A-series chip designed by Apple. Likely to be the A16, the chip will almost certainly offer a notable boost in both processor and graphics performance over the A15 Bionic tipped for the iPhone 13. The iPhone 14 is tipped to feature a 4nm chip from TSMC, which would be even smaller and more efficient than the 5nm A15 Bionic slated for the iPhone 13. However, a recent report claims that TSMC is having a problem producing the smaller chips, which means the iPhone 14 could stick with a 5nm chipset. If so, it will be the first time an iPhone's gone 3 years with the same size system on chip. See our take on a possible iPhone 14 4nm A16 Bionic chip and what it means for you as analysts weigh in on the benefits. It's also possible that the iPhone 14 will feature an Apple-made 5G modem, following Apple's acquisition of Intel's modem business. This would presumably give Apple more control over both the 5G performance and battery life impact. On the storage side, we'd expect Apple to continue with the options it has for the iPhone 13 range, which start at 128GB and go up to 1TB for the Pro models. However, a recent rumor has the iPhone 14 tipped to get a huge 2TB of onboard storage. Given no Samsung phone offers this, and they've previously been generous with storage, we're skeptical of an iPhone having the most storage on a smartphone to date. Admittedly, with ProRes video on offer, which can chew up storage, it would arguably make sense for Apple to increase the storage of its Pro phones. But we're still taking such a rumor with a serious pinch of salt. If you're enjoying this video, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so as not to miss out on our next upload. Going to next feature on iPhone 14 is the USB-C. One of the most enduring rumors around the iPhone 14 is that it will drop the Lightning port and go for USB-C connectivity instead. As mentioned earlier, Prosser has expressed doubt on this being the case. But other leakers have touted the USB-C rumor, noting that the iPhone 14 Pro will come with USB-C. With the European Union looking to force device makers to adopt standardized charging and cables by 2024, the days of the Lightning port could be numbered. Apple has a big European presence after all. But the jury is out on whether Apple will make such a move in time for the iPhone 14. We'd welcome USB-C connectivity, given Apple's iPads and MacBooks have adopted the port. But Apple can doggedly stick to its guns when it comes to the iPhone, so we'll reserve out predictions until more rumors float to the surface. iPhone 14. This is what we would like to see. A fresh design. Prosser's renders of the iPhone 14 tease a rather attractive-looking phone, but it's not a vast jump in Apple's industrial design aesthetic. Granted, Apple makes some of the nicest-looking phones around, but we'd like to see if it could push phone design further. Perhaps the iPhone 14 range could include the much-rumored iPhone Flip foldable phone. No notch. The iPhone 14 could come with a notch-less display, and we hope they bear fruit. Rumor has it this could be replaced with a punch hole, but we'd like to see an under-display camera so long as it didn't impact imaging or Face ID performance. Touch ID. We'd be rather confident that Apple will bring back Touch ID for the iPhone 14, even if it doesn't happen via an in-display sensor. Perhaps the side-mounted power button could have a Touch ID sensor integrated into it like the one on the iPad Air. Smarter features. While the Apple A series chips have always been powerhouses, we'd like to see Apple lean more into the AI side of things. Much like the Google Pixel 6 is set to do with its Tensor chip. That way we can have a smarter, more responsive Siri to compete with the Google Assistant. As well as smarter features that more intuitively serve up the data or services iPhone 14 users want when they want them. Killer camera capabilities. The iPhone 13 Pro Max offers one of the best camera phones around, but we want to see Apple push its camera tech and hardware even further. As it stands, the lead between the Pro Max and the likes of the Google Pixel 6 and Samsung Galaxy S21 Ultra isn't vast. With the iPhone 14, we'd like to see Apple deliver camera and a phone photography experience that wipes the floor with Android rivals. Forcing them to up really their photography game with their next-gen phones. And catching up on the zoom front would help, too. This is it for week guys. Check out more from our recent uploads.